Thank you very much indeed, Past President Sergeant at Arms Clive. And I will start the meeting in our traditional way by ringing the bell. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome all our guests, particularly our first-time guests, and ask Clive if he could identify any individuals that we could say hello to for the first time.
I haven't noticed anyone here for the first time. We've got some good friends who we haven't seen for a while, but nobody for the first time, President David.
Thank you. In that case, let me just welcome everybody. We'll be welcoming the speaker a little bit later, and I'm grateful to see both the speaking contributors on the screen now. I have had apologies from Varsi Daniels, who gives her regrets, and we just heard that Harry is going to be leaving us and missing the best part of the day. The other apologies, any other apologies? No.
I haven't received
Harry,
any.
would you like to give the Almoners report before you leave?
Yes, it's short and sweet. I have nothing to report this time. Thank you, President.
That is always good news. Thank you, Harry. I have some notices, but first let me do the birthdays. Is by any chance Shiraz Maharali with us at the moment?
No, he isn't, President David.
She's going to miss her birthday remembrances, which is a pity. The notices then, we have, I'd like to remind people about the meeting on the 21st of June. That was going to be our first physical meeting, but we're now saying that will be a virtual meeting. We're hoping to have, or intending to have, a members meeting on the 24th of June at the Chesterfield as a trial for hybrid activity before we start with our first physical meeting being Glasboot Day at the Chesterfield on the 28th of June. The next date that I'd like everybody to note is the 29th of May, when the Leonardo da Vinci Virtual Award Ceremony will be taking place, and you will all be invited to join that virtual ceremony. Are there any notices from chairmen of committees? We have next Monday a quarterly business meeting and a council meeting following after our speaker. So this is the members' opportunity to raise any matters with the council and the people running the club that they feel they wish to. Please don't miss the opportunity. Right, and I'd like now to announce our first contributor, who is a member of the club, who spoke to us last Easter. This week is Mental Health Awareness Week, and I've been asked to find a speaker for today by some of our members. But we have instead got a member of the club who, for the last 12 months, has been talking about mental health. And I would ask James Innes if he would tell us what he has been doing for the last 12 months since he spoke to us, and remind us of the issues involved and the things that we as members should be looking out for to help others. James, could I ask you to speak?
You will need to unmute yourself, Jim. Well done. You've done it.
Is that good? Am I loud and clear now? I never quite trust.
Yes, you are. Yeah, it's fine, James.
Thank you, President David. Yes, and hello, everyone. I'm pleased to see you all. It's been a while. I'm afraid my attendance record here has not been great, but I have been busy elsewhere in Rotary. I really have. Back in Easter 2020, I did indeed have the great honour of addressing our wonderful Rotary Club of London with a little talk entitled Bitten by the Black Dog, subtitle Surviving Depression. Many of you were there. Now, I had at the time basically intended it to be a bit of a one-off. So little was I to know that I'd still be regularly delivering this same talk over a year later. I've even got quite good at it now. That's primarily Rotary, yes, but also Masonic groups, prayer groups, Lions Club International, from groups of barely half a dozen to groups of hundreds. from places like Oudby-Lond, I think that's how it's pronounced. I have no idea where it is, never very good at geography, all the way over to far-flung foreign places like Dublin. I've done, I think, gosh, somewhere approaching 20 different Rotary clubs for a start. I still have further engagements in the pipeline. Just this coming Thursday, May the 13th, I'm going to be addressing the Rotary Club of Caterham. And I'm not sure where that is either. I'll have to Google it. My geography is rubbish. Anyway, as President Davis says, this week is Mental Health Awareness Week. And so he's asked me to give you just a bit of a brief update and to remind you of some of the key points I made when I spoke last year. My talk here with you last Easter certainly wasn't my first experience of confronting an audience full stop, but it certainly was when it comes to depression. It's the very first time I had ever spoken publicly about depression. Not something I've ever hidden in any way, but certainly not something I'd shouted from the rooftops in quite this manner before. And the past year has been very interesting, speaking to so many people up and down the country. Not only because I've actually really enjoyed it and hopefully been able to help some people, but actually the whole experience has been very helpful for me too. It may be a cliche, but it really is good to talk. I found I know it's been a tough year. It's been a very tough year, but actually my mental health, I think, has been pretty good the past 12 months. And I think being able to regularly engage with other people and talk about it and share feelings and stories with them has actually really helped. I was invariably well received by other Rotary clubs. And it's fascinating to see such a vast array of different clubs and the way they do things, etc. In terms of to visit upwards of 20 clubs in the space of a year. It's been very interesting as a Rotarian. Generally, I hope they found my talk interesting. Obviously, for me, a little bit repetitive, saying basically the same thing each time. But the bit I find the most interesting is always the Q&A afterwards. That's the part that I relish. Sometimes the smaller groups, often they'll be a bit reticent and I'll only perhaps get 2 or 3 questions, but often I'm bombarded with questions and it can really open up some very interesting dialogues about personal insights really on into living with, coping with, and indeed surviving depression. So many different questions, obviously recurrent questions. I think a popular one certainly is many ask me to try to describe what it's like suffering from depression. People who don't suffer from depression, trying to imagine it, envisage it, trying to picture it. I think it really is very hard to describe. And I'm a writer, I'm supposed to have a way with words. Maybe if I was a poet, I don't know, but I guess an emptiness is one way, a feeling of there being like a void, perhaps, or a kind of black hole inside one's psyche, sucking in all positive emotion, or positive energy, all happiness. I think in one talk, they themselves described it. They said it's like being in a dark pit that you just can't get out of. It's pitch black and you're stuck at the bottom of this pit and you can't escape. You feel trapped as well. Really, it's so hard to find the words, but obviously it can be pretty unpleasant and actually pretty painful. A lot of people don't realize this. We think of physical pain, but we often don't really understand mental pain. Now, having experienced both in my life, mental pain and physical pain, I'll take the physical pain any day, to be quite honest. Then again, I can't say I've given birth, and apparently that smarts a little, so my wife tells me. Besides actual questions, a lot of people wanted to actually share their own stories with me, which I enjoyed too. Took me off the spot for a change. Sharing with me, for example, how they've been personally affected by lockdown. Very interesting. So many different angles, so many different stories to hear. Also, very sadly, a number of stories from people who have lost loved ones to suicide. Including, I even spoke to one club where one of their members had very recently committed suicide, right in the middle of lockdown. Now, these were clearly poignant moments. One doesn't know what to say. What can one say? Anyway, I would like to sort of wrap up with just a little reminder of some of the key guidelines that I cribbed off the NHS, basically, on warding off depression. Their first one on the list is to stay connected with others. I know these by heart now. That as Rotarians, I think we really have that one covered. Secondly, they say talk about your worries. Now, it's normal to feel a bit worried, scared, or helpless about the current situation. Just remember that it is okay to share your concerns with others you trust. And doing so may help them too. That is critical. Doing so may help them too. One of the best ways to help somebody else is to open up to them. If you open up to them and say, okay, maybe there's light at the end of the tunnel now, but I'm still feeling pretty unsettled about everything we've been through. Opening up to them is a great way of getting them to open up to you. Sounds manipulative, but it really does work well. You're trying to help these people. Look after your body, look after your sleep. Definite links between physical health and mental health. Sleep, for example, even with physical health, are linked to problems of high blood pressure, but certainly mental health is impacted greatly by sleep problems. And their final point is keep your mind active. Again, I don't think I need to lecture us Rotarians on that one. I'd also like to remind you how to help someone with depression. I touched on it just then, but recognizing the signs is admittedly very difficult. They can often be very contrasting. Somebody may be overeating, or they may have lost their appetite. They might be sleeping more than usual, or be unable to sleep. They might be lethargic, lacking in energy, or they might be quite hyperactive and fidgety. Really, what one's looking for is a prolonged and marked change in behavior. If you know someone well, you will usually spot if something's, they're out of sorts for a distinct period of time. So what to do? Well, let them know you care, obviously, and are there to listen. Accept them as they are. Certainly don't judge them in any way. Just listen. Gently encourage them to help themselves. That's a particularly tricky one, getting them to take those first few steps. Get information about the services available to them, for example, psychotherapy, obviously, and that can easily be done via Skype these days. Or even if they're at an early stage and say sleep is predominantly their problem, going to their GP, for example. GPs are quite happy to see people about sleep issues. I've spoken to our local GP about this, not with regard to myself, but I said, if someone comes to you and saying they're having difficulty sleeping, problems with their sleep, would you feel they were perhaps wasting your time? It's not a serious medical condition. And he said, no, James, because I recognize fully the link between problems with sleep and issues of mental health, and indeed issues such as I mentioned earlier, blood pressure. Stay in touch with them, evidently. Keep a close eye on them, whether it's just the odd message, text, or something dropped by, etc. The process requires patience. Leading that horse to water, as in getting them to take those first steps of seeking help, can be very difficult. And sometimes you just won't succeed at all. But doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Obviously, if the person you're worried about expresses suicidal feelings, then the time is definitely to seek professional help. And you can do that on their behalf. People often don't realize this too, that it's not just the individual who's suffering themselves who can reach out to the Samaritans. You can call the Samaritans on their behalf and ask for guidance. The Samaritans 116 123, or even, and the NHS do advocate this, 111. NHS 111. You can call them up, say, I'm worried about somebody. I'm not sure what to do. Can you guide me? Can you assist me? Can you give me some help? Do seek professional help if you're worried in that respect. Anyway, that rounds it up neatly there. Thank you for hearing me out, and thank you, President David, for this invitation to come back for this little update.
Thank you very much indeed, James. I know that if anybody has questions of you, they can leave them on the chat or get in touch with you through your club connections or email.
With pleasure.
Perhaps you'd put a connection on chat so that people could get in touch with you.
Will do, absolutely.
And I'm aware that within, maybe not within our club, but within Rotaract, there have been issues of mental health, and people do need ways of being helped. So thank you, James, for your contribution. And we'll leave the questions to offline, as I think probably is how most people would like to communicate them. Thank you. I'd now like to hand over to Brigadier Tim Waugh. Tim has been doing fantastic work for the club, and he's engaged a 1 in a million speaker. Tim, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, President David. Fellow Rotarians, I'm delighted to introduce to you Michelle Claessens, who will talk to us on bringing the sun to Earth. It is the next big technical challenge to give us safe green power. He will talk about ITER, and that is the International Nuclear Fusion Research and Engineering Project. You'll probably never have heard of it, and I'm sure you'll be fascinated by the scale and the prospects for what will be, I believe, the most important technical breakthrough of this century. Michel holds a PhD from Brussels University. His background is physical chemistry and science journalism. In 2011, he became the head of communication and external relations at the ITAR organization in southern France, and he's now in charge of ITAR policy and communications in the European Commission Directorate General for Energy. In parallel, Michel also teaches science journalism and science communication at the University of Brussels. He's a well-known author on science subjects and a regular TV contributor. His latest book, ITAR, The Great Fusion Reactor, was published last year by Springer. He's also a specialist on science policy, science communication, and public perception of science, and is an active member of international networks and frequent speaker at international conferences, and is a TED speaker, for instance. And he's currently developing a project on science culture, bringing together 15 teams of international experts. Quite an impressive biography, I'm sure you will recognize. Michel, I hand over to you, and we look forward to your presentation. Would you please unmute yourself? Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for this nice introduction. Dear President and dear members, so I'm pleased to be with you virtually, not physically. I would have enjoyed to come to London as much as you probably, but it should be fine thanks to the modern technology. Now, I would like to share my screen. I hope it works, to show you a couple of photos and graphics. You see this?
Yes, it's up there, Michel.
Okay,
thank you.
Voilà. So I propose to give you an introduction to this fantastic project called ITER in 25 minutes, if it is okay with you, so that we can have time for questions, comments, discussions. As Tim said, ITER is not so well known by the public, and we can discuss, we can touch on this, but it raises big expectations. It addresses a big challenge, which is the supply of energy for the whole planet. As we all know, we have to diversify the supply of energy, and especially to make sure that the energy that we consume are cleaner and more respectful of the climate. So fusion, nuclear fusion, can be an option. It's not sure yet, but it can be. And basically the challenge is to reproduce, to replicate what's going on in the sun and the stars, all the stars actually, which produce huge amounts of energy thanks to nuclear fusion. So how are we going to handle this? And voilà, this is the story of ITER, the ITER project. This is a sketch of the site in the south of France, Cadarache. It's in the heart of Provence. And here, 7 members, actually 35 countries, are building ITER. This is a photograph, a recent photograph of the site as it is now. Actually, the photo was taken early this year. So the site is quite huge. As you can see, the ground is nearly 200 hectares. It's not far from Aix-en-Provence, for those who know a little bit Provence, 80 kilometers from Marseille, and very close to the CEA. You see the buildings in the back, which is the biggest nuclear research center in France. So here, 35 countries, that is the EU, China, Korea, South Korea, India, Russia, United States, and Japan are building the ITER project, which stands for International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. The aim is to exploit fusion reactions to generate energy. All of us, all of you, I'm sure you are quite familiar with fission, nuclear fission, which is about splitting heavy nuclei like uranium or plutonium to produce energy. Fusion, nuclear fusion, is about the opposite. It is not about splitting, but about fusing light nuclei, such as hydrogen or hydrogen isotopes like deuterium and tritium. And this reaction generates even more energy. Now, how to do this on Earth? This is the purpose of the ITER reactor. You see here a computer sketch of the reactor. It is quite big. The machine you see on your screen is about 30 meters high and 30 meters large. So it's a small building, but not so small, of several floors. So the aim of this machine is to produce 500 megawatts of power by fusion. So we expect to produce about 10 times the thermal power that will be injected in the machine to heat the gas, because the reaction will take place in the center of the reactor that you see on the screen. This purple cavity you see, which is a toroidal cavity, about 800 cubic meters, so it's quite big. It's bigger than a swimming pool, I would say. In this cavity, when the machine will be working, the technicians will make a complete vacuum, and then they will inject a few grams of hydrogen isotopes, so very small amount of matter, the fuel that is hydrogen isotopes, and then this gas will be heated up to 150 million degrees. So it's very, very hot, of course, 10 times hotter than the sun. And when you reach these conditions, the nuclei, which usually repel each other because of the electrostatic repulsion, at this temperature, the nuclei fuse, merge to produce a nuclei of helium, and this release a huge amount of energy. Voilà. In a few words, this is the principle of the reactor that will be tested in a few years. We are still building this reactor, as you have seen on the photograph. Please keep in mind that this reactor is experimental. It will not produce any electricity. Just with quotes, testing the feasibility of this technology, and we are not going to demonstrate the economic feasibility of fusion. Fusion has a long history, actually, and you see here the first, we call them tokamak, these fusion reactors. The first models, the first reactors you see on the photo were quite small. They can be put on a table, on a bench, but the principle is there. It's a toroidal, toroid type machine surrounded by magnets to confine, to keep the gas, which we call the plasma, when it raises, it reaches temperature of 100 million degrees. So this photo illustrates the principle of these machines. Then it was followed by even bigger and bigger machines, like this one, which is JET, the Joint European Torus, which is located in Culham, near Oxford, so in your country. It is a European machine built, of course, with the support and the contribution of UK, and it is currently the biggest tokamak in the world. And they will carry out important experiments this summer in this machine. Most big countries have at least one tokamak, one type of fusion reactors to do experiments, to learn, and to also try to progress the science and the technology of these machines. The idea of ITER comes back to 1985, actually, so more than 30 years ago, when President Reagan and Michael Gorbachev, you see on the photo, met for the first time in Geneva, basically to talk about the control of nuclear weapons. But the official press release mentioned as the last point the idea that the two leaders were proposing to launch an international cooperation to move forward fusion as a source of energy. After this meeting, a scientific committee was set up, basically by the United States, the Soviet Union, the European Community, which was not yet named European Union, and Japan. These four countries or group of countries are really the founders of the project. And this scientific committee started working on the design, the conceptual design of the machine, what it could look like. This took about more than 10 years, actually, to have a design of the machine. Then came the question where to build ITER, because with all these countries and after the founding, the launch of ITER, additional members joined the project, in particular China, South Korea, and then India. So a priori, ITER could have been built in all these countries. So this was, of course, an important decision. But actually, there were not many applications to host ITER. Basically, there were 4 applications. One from Canada, because at that time, I mean, it's the beginning of the year 2000. Canada was considering joining the project, and then there was a change of government, and this idea was not pursued. so Canada made an application, and then Spain, France, and Japan. The ITER members told the European Commission, please make sure that, please work a little bit on this to make sure that Europe makes only one proposal. And finally, it was the site of France, which was chosen and proposed by the EU. During 3 years, there were intense political and diplomatic discussions between Japan and the EU, but also with the other members. And finally, on 28 June 2005, the ITER members decided to build ITER in Cadarache, in the south of France. 2 days after the decision, President Chirac, that you see on the photo, make a quick trip to Cadarache to visit the site, to thank also the team there, basically the CEA, for their work. He supported also at the highest level the application of France and Europe as a whole. For those who know a little bit, the people on this photo at the center, this is the mayor of Aix-en-Provence, and behind the lady, Bernard Bigot, who is currently the Director General of ITER, the ITER project. Then an international treaty was signed by the 7 parties in the Palais de l'Élysée in Paris with the President Chirac, you see, joined by the President of the Commission at the time and the representative of the 7 members. Then the work started really. The construction started in the middle of Provence in a big forest. And the first big work was to level the ground and to create this huge platform. Some will say it's a boulodrome, a terrain de pétanque, a huge terrain de pétanque, but voilà, to accommodate all the buildings of the project. The complexity of ITER, of course, we are talking of cutting-edge technology. We are pushing the technology to the limits, but one of the complexities of the project is the fact that the 35 countries share the manufacturing. So some countries will manufacture this part, this component, and others this, etc., which makes the project very complicated in terms of logistics, and also very sensitive to difficulties or problems that may arise. And the logics was pushed to the limits because, for example, the machine will contain 18 toroidal field coils, toroidal field magnets. These are the big magnets you see here on this sketch, which are D-shaped magnets. You see, huge magnets. But instead of asking one country to manufacture these magnets, this was shared between EU and Japan, you see? So making things a little bit more complicated. And the same logics apply to all the components. So it's because the founders, the countries supporting and paying also for the project, wanted to learn from this experiment, to learn from the manufacturing, but also to to have their industry gaining from this experience, for sure. Voilà. So in a way, it is a research project, but it's also about, in a way, education, learning together. It's a nice idea, but in practice, it makes things complicated. This is a recent photograph of the site. It shows the main buildings. You can see the cylinder in the center, which will host the reactor soon. There is a huge cryogenic plant on the site, built by Air Liquide, the French company, and it will be among the largest fridges in the world, if I may say, because the plant will produce tons of liquid helium and liquid nitrogen to cool down the magnets of the reactor. Voilà, this is a photo of the first magnet that will be put in place in ITER. The photo was taken in China because this magnet has been manufactured by China. Although Europe is responsible for the magnet construction, this was handed over to China. So the photo gives you an idea of the size of the machine. Because this is one of the smallest magnets that will be put in place in Italy. Voilà. And last year, exactly 1 year ago, 21st of May, the basis of the reactor, the basis of the cryostat, actually, so the huge thermos bottle that will contain the reactor was moved from the construction hall here into the reactor hall. And a few days ago, basically 3 weeks ago, they put the magnet you have seen in China. They put it in the pit here, in the bottom of the reactor. These photos gives you a flavor of the size of the reactor. Then soon they will put in place these D-shaped toroidal magnets, which are 17 meters high, and they weigh. They have the same weight as a big airplane, so they are huge components. Actually, they built 19 such magnets, half in Japan and half plus one in Europe, because they wanted to have a spare part in case there is a problem with one of these magnets. Even if you are not an engineer, you can feel that the quality control, the quality assurance are big issues in such a complicated project, of course, because all these components are made in different countries. And at the end, for these magnets at least, you have to make sure that they are identical at the end. What is interesting to note is that although there are dozens of companies involved in this manufacturing. For these magnets, these companies decided to buy the steel at the same company in France to make sure that at least the steel is identical. Voilà. There are huge transport also because you have to transport all these big components to the site in Provence. So there is a special road which has been managed by France. But actually, it's not a special road. It's an existing road, but at some part it has been enlarged, or the bridge have been rebuilt, a new bridge have been built, and so on, to make sure that these heavy trucks, like this one, this is quite impressive. This is for the very big components. This truck with 352 wheels can use the road. It's quite impressive. How much it costs? So, unsurprisingly, this is quite expensive. This is a very expensive project. My estimate in the book is that the cost currently is above 40 billion of euros. There is not much publicity given by the ITER organization about the cost, the real cost. They are not keen to communicate about this. Okay, we can discuss if you want. But for sure, it will be one of the most expensive scientific projects on Earth. The schedule, the time schedule. So currently we are assembling the reactor here. First experiment normally in 2025, but I can tell you that there will be further delays. It's not official yet, but it will be impossible to keep this date. And then full operation 2035, and then we will really know if the experiment is a success, and if yes, it will open the door to industrial application of the technology. Voilà. The good point is that this technology is safe, although we are talking about 100 million of degrees. It is safe. It is using very small amount of fuel. There is no chain reaction, so no risk of explosion. Even if there is some incident or even terrorist attack, who knows, simulation have shown that the impact on the environment will be really minimal. It's important to know that now, although 20 years ago, ITER was the only project on fusion aimed to show the feasibility of fusion energy, now, today, the situation is very different. There are more than 20, close to 30 projects, many funded by private capitals, funds, now on Earth. So this is quite interesting from a scientific technology point of view. But now, okay, ITER is not the only project. There are several ones in the UK. Tokamak Energy, this is a company building a spherical tokamak, as you see on the photo, which aims to provide electricity to the grid in about 10 years' time. So these are ambitious projects which are progressing quite well. It's quite interesting. China recently decided to build a sort of ITER on their own, although they are in ITER and they will stay in ITER, but they want to move fast and will build a sort of ITER producing electricity. Voilà. So there is a dynamism which shows that there is also a sort of confidence in this technology. So, voilà. It's quite interesting. Communication, just now 2 minutes about my work in this fantastic project. It's about communication. This is a big issue because it's complex, of course. The public is very interested, but most of us do not know anything about this project. And there are things to be improved. For example, I was a little bit fighting with the management of ITER because they claim that ITER will produce 500 megawatt from just 50 megawatt of input power, but this is not right. We cannot say this. It's not just producing 10 times more energy than injected. Actually, for ITER, the balance of power will be almost zero. Okay, so, but we have to, voilà, my point is that we have to communicate scientifically, honestly to the public about this. So ITER is not well known, so one of my first time was to make sure that ITER, at least you can find the information about the project. And one good point is that we have, and it's still possible, to we have organized visits for the public and open doors. And this is, in my view, one of the great achievements in terms of communication of the project, because this allows families, people to come to the site and sometimes meet also scientists. This is, in my view, very positive. Voilà. I would like to thank you for your time. Just a reminder also that I published this book, which is a popular science book, so intended for a non-specialist public, if you want to know a little bit more. Otherwise, I will be happy to answer questions and receive your comments, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Michel. I'll wait for you to clear your screen.
Yeah, I'll do that. Voilà.
Merci.
Yeah.
And recover. Before it is normal before the speaker starts that I do the loyal toast. I will defer that until after we've had the questions, but it's not forgotten, and my apologies. Clive, would you be good enough to host the question session, please?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, President David. If you have a question for Michel, would you please unmute yourself or raise your hand, the little blue hand, because it will then bring you to the top of the list on the right side of my screen, and I will be able to call you. And I'm pleased to see that they're starting to come up, and we're going to start with the Ridian and then Ian Bolcom, and then we will move on from there. So Ridian, Ian Bolcom, and then it will be Dick Nathan. Ridian, would you like to address your question, please?
Thank you, Clive. Michel, someone is calling in here. I hope my wife is going to pick it up. But my question really is about the effectiveness of the returns. Clearly, you say it's a balance on the project itself, that you actually have 100 input in, 100 input out. But there must be some calculations as to what could be achieved under commercial exploitation in the future. So perhaps you could give us some idea of that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. My point, yes, was that the communication so far, at least until 3 years ago, communication of the project has been really on the fusion reaction itself, by saying that we will heat the plasma using 50 megawatt and we will generate 500 megawatts. So it means a gain of 10. And this was, in my view, not explicit enough, because most of the public understood that, oh, it's fantastic. You will generate so 10 times more energy than injected. And this is not true. And everybody knows it is not true. So, so if you want really to have an estimate of to address the question of the economic interest, you have to compare the power that you will generate with the power that the whole site, not just the reaction, but the whole reactor and the technical systems like the cryogenics, the magnets and so on, the diagnostics, etc., will use. And then you will find that there is no public data on this, although they know. They know, of course, how much the site, the plant will use in terms of electric power. So voila. So this has been, I have done the research on this. This has been done by an American journalist who has published detailed reports on this. And voila, he came to the conclusion that for ITER, the balance will be almost zero, which is probably fine, because, as I said, it's an experimental facility. We are not yet in the industrial phase. So this is fine, but in my opinion, voila, this should be clearly mentioned or explained. You see on the website, there is no problem for the public to understand this. But well, voila, I think we should be very clear on that. So to answer also your question, we still don't know. This is a question mark whether this this technology will be commercially viable and interesting, because voila, we have not yet. ITER was designed to make the reaction possible, but not all the systems have been designed to be the most economic ones and the most voila, interesting from an industrial point of view. So we have not yet a clear answer to this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ian Bolcom, please.
Thank you, Michel. Absolutely fascinating, amazing, and learnt so much from your talk. Thank you so much. Two very quick questions. Presumably, if it is commercially viable, will only the countries who have contributed towards it benefit? And secondly, presumably UK was involved as part of the EU. Is it still involved, or is it going its own way, as it were, with the other experiment you mentioned?
A quick answer to your question, and thank you. Yes, very good question. The participating countries have direct access to the whole technologies that is developed in ITER. So they are the first beneficiaries, of course, of the project. and they will have access to the whole technology. By the way, it's probably the reason why the United States, which left the project in 1999 and then came back in 2002, because, okay, they made a calculation and it's quite expensive, as you have seen, but for this type of investment, they will have access to the technology. In 2013, the United States were considering again leaving the project, but they decided at the end to stay. But they imposed the change of director general at the time. Okay, well, that's voilà. And to answer your second question, yes, the UK basically will stay in the project. There's been the agreement at the end of last year. Is not yet completely ratified and signed, but this is in the pipeline. So yes, what I don't know yet if the ITER organization will still be allowed to recruit UK staff, but for the companies, they will still have access, and later on, the scientists will also have access to the project. So basically, yes, UK is still in, fortunately.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Dick Nathan. Dick, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Michel. A very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed hearing about it. I have two very simple questions for you, please. Do you know the world record for sustaining the plasma torus? How long is that? And my second question is, how will this technology do competing against energy from natural sources like wind power and solar power?
Thank you. Thank you. The world record for sustaining plasma is 7 minutes. It's still a record achieved by the French machine, which belongs to CEA, also in Cadarache, so 3 kilometers from ITER. So this is still the world record. To answer your question, how do this technology compare to wind and other renewables? Bon, as I told you, we are not yet in a position to offer real energy produced by fusion. The supporters, the proponents of fusion explain that the advantage of fusion is that it should work almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, and we provide a stable production compared to wind, solar, etc. This is also a subject which is evolving thanks to the technology. A few years ago, people said, experts were saying that we need a base load production, like fission, fusion, and so on, to ensure a stable production. But now, as I can see, as I can read from the reports, it's less and less a valid argument, because there are big progress in the renewable energies, and in Europe, we are talking about transnational grids, and there are exchange of electricity, energy between countries, etc. So it looks like it is less and less valid, but voila. This is just my impression.
Thank you, Michel.
Thank you. Whilst I'm waiting for any other questions to come, I wonder if I could address a question. I'm not a scientist, but it absolutely blows my mind when you talk about the temperatures that are released. How on earth do you manage anything that generates such a phenomenal temperature?
Yeah, it's when I was welcoming groups of visitors in Cadarache, this was one of the favorite questions. And some people were quite afraid about this. How can you manage 150 million degrees and how can you obtain this? Well, in short, this is the aim of these big magnets, which will surround the cavity. Okay, thanks to this magnet, thanks to the huge magnetic field that will be created, there will be a sort of magnetic bottle surrounding the cavity, which will prevent the charged particles, the nuclei, the electrons, to touch the walls, you see, and to communicate the high energy to the walls. So this will allow, yes, the plasma to achieve 150 million degrees, while the walls will keep a quite low temperature. Maybe they will be at 340 degrees Celsius, so not so high, far from the plasma temperature. So this is quite fantastic and a bit difficult to to figure out in our brain, but it works. Huh? This technology is now used and tested in many other machines. ITER will just be the biggest one on Earth, but it works. We know this works. And then to achieve 150 million degrees, with the current technology, is quite easy, with quotes. Huh? And basically, they will use in ITER 3 technologies to heat the plasma and achieve 100 million degrees. So please also keep in mind that in this big cavity, there will be only 2-3 grams of hydrogen, so very small amount of matter. So it's quite easy to heat them up. Huh? But basically, there will be an electric current circulating in the plasma, which will heat the gas. And then they will use four big antennas, a little bit like in our microwaves in the kitchen, but 20 times bigger probably. So they will inject microwave radiation in the gas to heat the particles. And then a third technology, they will inject some pellets of some ice pellets of deuterium, the gas, hydrogen gas, in the plasma, and by collisions, this will increase the temperature. Voilà. In the sketch.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim Waugh, you have a question, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michel. My question is really about the other experiments you mentioned. You mentioned that one might come in line in 10 years' time. Do you see these as competitors? They're using the same technology. They want access to what you're doing. But are they competitors in the long term to produce fusion energy? Because as you rightly point out, fusion might not be the only solution around in this century. And there might be trade-offs on both sides. But it looks as though people are taking it seriously and are looking at their own projects, perhaps looking at it from a slightly different perspective than you are. Do you see them as competitors?
They can be competitors. Most of the experts in the field say that these projects are not yet there. You see, they are still in a quite non-mature phases. So they're at the beginning, basically, you see. But because they are smaller, the aim is to build smaller reactors. So they may go faster, who knows? Huh? And the problem there is that ITER has so many delays and will still have delays. And maybe one of these projects may succeed before. At that time, today, we don't know.
Okay, thank
My
you.
colleagues say, they are not yet mature, etc. There is a lot of money being injected, and some financier, venture capitalists, they expect also to find maybe a new technology for other applications, and this happens also. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Voila. Let's see.
Thank you. President David, I think we will have to conclude the questions there. You've got one or two things that you needed to do afterwards. I wonder if you would like to invite
Clive, I just wondered if I could ask, put my hand up.
Of course you can.
If I could just ask a question, because I wondered how important the size of the current experiment is. With nuclear, there's the debate about taking small plants, but if you have to build a plant requiring 1,000-ton carrying ability of a vehicle to get the bits to site, there can be very few places where you could actually build a plant. And if you've got to transport bits from all over the world in order to make a plant, then it doesn't sound very practical at all. And presumably, different countries have put in different amounts of money and probably got different benefits in terms of production facilities and so on. But the technology is available for the least amount of money that any one country has contributed, which would give them a commercial advantage in exploiting the technology that they receive. How do these elements balance out in your mind, Michel?
Well, this is the bottom line, yes, of some of these alternative projects is to allow to build a plant, a smaller plant, much more easier, which with also less logistic difficulties. And I didn't talk about this. There is also an issue about some materials and the fuel, because ITER will basically use deuterium and tritium. Deuterium is fine. There is a lot. There are plenty of deuterium in the oceans. But tritium exists in very limited quantities on Earth. So if many other projects follow the technology, there will be a shortage. It will be a bottleneck. So I think for this reason, it's very interesting that some of these projects explore also alternative technologies, not just deuterium-tritium fusion, but also other fusion with boron, for example, to circumvent these logistic difficulties.
Thank you very much. Could I now ask Rilian Jones to give you a vote of thanks on behalf of the club? Rilian.
Michel, thank you very much for that presentation, which gave us a very good understanding of the enormous extent of this project, the effectiveness of the international cooperation, and in a very Rotarian kind of way, the future possibility of helping mankind with the global warming problem, and producing electricity and energy by effective means. Thank you very much. I would like to ask all my colleagues to join with me in thanking you in the usual manner. Thank you.
And then it is up to me,
Thank you very much.
It's up to me, Michel, to present you with a certificate of your talk, which I will send you in a digital format, and hopefully in due course we'll manage to make it an actual piece of a document in your hands. But that's for the future. So thank you again.
Very lovely. Thank you very much.
I now would like to do firstly a toast. We do a loyal toast to the Queen, and the Queen is opening in person, going to be opening Parliament, with a state opening of Parliament tomorrow. So she must be the oldest reigning monarch ever to open an event like that. So could we offer a loyal toast to the Queen? The Queen. Thank you. The next item is to announce next week's meeting, which is Commandant Philippa Lorimer, MBE, talking about the Fannies Undaunted, deploying all-female rapid response. There will be a lot more information in the bulletin, but it will be an absolutely, all-female rapid response teams in times of national crisis, 1907 to 2021. It's an amazing organization, which you will learn an immense amount about from Commandant Lorimer next week. And I hope you can all join us for that presentation. It's followed on the 24th of May by Brigadier Andrew Jackson, CBE, talking about the Tower of London and living with history. Those are the next two meetings. I think, Clive, if there's nothing else, then I'll just get my screen back. Try and anyway.
You're frozen, David.
Thank you, Clive, for bringing that to my attention. I think if there is there any other matters that the members would wish me to cover? If not, I will close the meeting and thank everybody for their attendance. Particular thanks to the speaker and to Tim for his organisation. So let me offer the final toast of the lunch, which is to Rotary and peace the world over.
Rotary and peace the world over.
Peace the world over. Thank you. And with the usual raucous bell, I close the meeting.